Hello and welcome to the channel. I am here for a ranking video for you guys. Now for this ranking, I'll be ranking the Megadeth discography. Now this is a pretty difficult discography to rank since they have a lot of albums and a lot of great albums too. So this was not really an easy ranking, but I feel like that this is a pretty consistent ranking of mine. So yeah, we're going to be going from worst to best, of course. You know how it goes. So yeah, let's go ahead and start at the bottom with Megadeth. We got Super Collider, which is easily their weakest album, I think. I mean, this album just doesn't really do much for me. I think I've only listened to this thing like once, and I was not crazy about it whatsoever. So yeah, it doesn't really have memorable tracks or anything like that. It's just a very forgettable album and easily Megadeth's worst album. At least that's my opinion, but yeah. Super Collider is just, yeah, not a very solid release, I think, and it's also the only Megadeth studio album I don't have. I just kind of skipped it because I'm not the craziest about it, of course. It doesn't really do much for me. But all the others I do have on CD, of course. But next up, we got Risk. Now, this album is a pinch better than Super Collider, I think. Some people don't like this album. I know there's some people that either have this at the bottom or Super Collider or World Needs a Hero. Usually those albums are at the bottom for some people, but this album I don't think is as bad as Super Collider. This album at least has some good stuff on it, and you know, stuff that I remember, you know. Insomnia, Crush 'Em, I'll Be There. Yeah, those are some pretty good songs. So, Risk, obviously not one of their best, but I think it's a decent album at best. So, Risk. Next up, we got The World Needs a Hero. Now, like I said, there's a lot of people that do have this album really low, if not at the bottom. I don't think this album is deserving to be at the bottom. I think this album is actually alright. It's actually not that bad of an album. I like Moto Psycho, 1000 Times Goodbye, and yeah, I think those are some pretty good songs. So yeah, The World Needs a Hero. It's just, I don't know, I think the biggest problem with it is most of this album just sounds like a bunch of B-sides to their 90s material. But yeah, this album isn't bad though. I think it's still good for what it is. So The World Needs a Hero. Next up, we got, now some people, well actually some people might disagree on this one for sure. There's some people that actually might have this in the top 5 or, I don't know, something like that. But next up we got Cryptic Writings. Now, this album I think is decent as well. There's definitely, you know, there's definitely some good stuff on here. I like Trust, and I also like Almost Honest. But yeah. This album isn't bad, but it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of forgettable. There's a lot of tracks on here that I don't return to other than the first couple of tracks, but the album for what it is still pretty good though. I don't mind the album, but I don't know, I'm just not the craziest about it, which is why it's as low as it is on my list, on my ranking. So, Cryptic Writings. Next up we got 13. Now, I guess I just have a similar complaint to this album as I do with The World Needs a Hero. This album just seems like just standard Megadeth, at least as far as the modern material goes, and it just seems like maybe B-sides to their last album or something. But I do like this album a little bit better than World Needs a Hero, and I even like it more than Cryptic Writings, believe it or not. But yeah. This album isn't bad though. I think it's still pretty good. I like Sudden Death, what else? Black Swan, We the People, and a few others. But yeah, this album isn't all bad. I think it's, you know, a pretty good album. Has some pretty good songs on it. So 13. Next up we got Endgame. Now, there's some people that would have this album a lot higher on their ranking, but I don't know. There's not many memorable tracks in my opinion. This album definitely has some stuff that I do like, such as This Day We Fight and 44 Minutes, and a few others as well. But yeah, this album also kind of struggles with having, I guess, forgettable tracks and just songs that don't have the replay value other than the first half of the album. The first half of the album is actually pretty strong, and then, you know, the second half of the album, while there's still some good stuff on the second half, I don't know, it's really difficult to go back to, but I still think for what it is, it's a good album. So, Endgame. And then we got United Abominations, which I know some people might disagree with this album being above Endgame and Cryptic Writings and even 13 maybe, I don't know. I actually really dig this album. There's actually a lot to like about this album. I really like Sleepwalker, Washington Is Next, and of course the, I guess, redone version for A Tout Le Monde. I mean, it's a really good remake song, I think. It's featuring a guest singer, but yeah, this album is actually really good. I think it is one of the best in terms of the 2000s material from Megadeth. It's actually kind of overlooked to an extent. So, United Abominations. Next up, we got Megadeth's debut album, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. This is the Final Kill version, and yeah, I mean, what can I say about it? This is a great album. I mean, from this point on in the ranking, you're getting into just solid material from Megadeth, I think, but yeah, this album is really good. It's their debut, of course. I really like songs like Last Rites, and of course, Mechanics. I mean, these are Megadeth classics. You can't go wrong with them. So, Killing Is My Business, their debut record, but yeah, it's really good. Now, next up, some people might disagree with this album being above, you know, Killing Is My Business, Endgame, all those albums. But next up, we got The System Has Failed, which I think is actually probably their best in terms of their 2000s work. Yeah, I actually really dig this album. This album has a really nice feel to it from start to finish, I think. This is, well, one of the best albums in their 2000s time, in my opinion. I mean, this album still has songs that I go back to sometimes, such as Blackmail the Universe, Die Dead Enough, Kick the Chair, The Scorpion, what else? Back in the Day. I mean, these are really good songs. So, The System Has Failed actually has a lot of great stuff on it, and it's actually an underrated album. I think this might even be Megadeth's most underrated album, but that's really difficult to decide. But yeah, I really like the album, so The System Has Failed. Next up, we got into what I think is the best album of Megadeth's in terms of the 2010s material. That is Dystopia. Yeah, their latest album, and I mean, what can I say about this album? It's a great album. It has many great songs on it, like the title track, Fatal Illusion, Post-American World, Lying in State, and a few others. But yeah, this album is actually really good. I really dig this album, and definitely the best of their modern material for sure, and the 2010s material. So yeah, definitely a great album. I really dig this album. So yeah, Dystopia, it's actually really good, and I think it's one of their heaviest albums too, so that should tell you something. Next up, we got So Far So Good So What. Now, there's actually a lot of people that are actually not crazy about this album. There's a lot of people that have this album closer to the bottom, but I personally don't see it. I actually really dig this album. It's actually kind of underrated. And probably their most underrated in terms of the 80s stuff from Megadeth. But yeah, this album is really good. I really like Set the World Afire, In My Darkest Hour, and Liar. Yeah, those are some good songs. So yeah, So Far So Good So What. Definitely a really great album, and kind of overlooked too. If you haven't listened to it in a while, definitely go back and revisit it. It's actually a really great album. So, yeah. Next up, we got Euthanasia, which I think is actually probably Megadeth's most underrated album. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, but I actually did not expect this album to be this high on my ranking. But, you know, this album is just fantastic. I have very little complaints with it. This album actually has a lot of great songs on it. Reckoning Day, Train of Consequences, Addicted to Chaos, A Tu Le Monde, of course, Family Tree, I Thought I Knew It All. I mean, these are some songs you cannot go wrong with. But yeah, there's actually a lot of great songs on this album, and I might even go as far to say that this is Megadeth's most underrated album, but that's pretty difficult to decide. But yeah, Euthanasia, definitely a great album. So now we are in the top 3. Now at this point, you guys probably already know what my top 3 is with Megadeth. So at number 3, we got Countdown to Extinction, which is their, I guess, commercially successful album. This is the album where they went kind of mainstream, you could say. But, you know, I still really like the album. Even though this is technically considered Megadeth's Black Album, you could say. Yeah, I mean, Symphony of Destruction, Foreclosure of a Dream, Sweating Bullets, Ashes in Your Mouth. I mean, these are some Megadeth classics, of course. Definitely a great album, and probably one of their darkest albums, too. I really like the mood of this album, so yeah, definitely, the replay value is pretty strong for the most part with this album. I've said before that I think this album is kind of overrated. I can see it being overrated if, you know, people have it at, like, number 1. I personally don't think it's number 1 at all. But it's still a great album, and I really dig it. So, Countdown to Extinction, it's definitely a great album. So now we are here at number 2. So, at number 2, this is the second album from Megadeth, and it's, of course, a classic. That is Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? This is easily one of their best albums. If you're new to Megadeth and wondering which album you should start with, I would definitely say this album. Either this album or the next album, which is number 1 on my ranking, would be a good starting point for you. But Peace Sells is a great album. I really like Wake Up Dead, the title track, Devil's Island, My Last Words. I mean, most of the tracks on here I think are really good. If not all the tracks are really good. But yeah, I really like this album. Definitely just a solid album for sure. Definitely a must listen for any metalhead. At least that's what I think. So at number 2, that's what I got. Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Definitely a great album. Okay, so now we are here at number 1. Now, you guys probably already know what number 1 is. It's not only my favorite Megadeth album, but it's maybe one of my favorite albums of all time. This is one of those albums that I would give a 10 out of 10. Because very few albums out there I'd give a 10 out of 10. And this is another album that I think is a must listen for any metalhead. You guys already know what it is. At number 1, I got Rust in Peace. And I mean, this is just an amazing thrash metal album. Probably my favorite thrash album of all time. I might even go as far to say that. It's definitely a great album. This album has some of the best guitar work that I've ever heard in metal. I mean, everything from Holy Wars to Punishment Due, Hangar 18, Take No Prisoners, Tornado of Souls, and a few others, of course. But yeah, this album, I have little to no complaints with this album. I mean, it's just awesome. It's an awesome album for sure. So if you have not listened to this album, definitely go and check it out. I'd say it's a metalhead essential album for sure. But yeah, you cannot go wrong with this album. So that's what I got at number 1, Rust in Peace, and it's my favorite Megadeth album. Well, there you go, guys. That is my ranking of the Megadeth discography. Let me know what you guys think of my ranking for this band, and let me know how you guys would rank their discography. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and take care.